Okay, we're good to go?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that Michelle had actually asked me to do is come in and do a listing presentation for you guys, just to give an idea of, like what to say, how to approach, and how to structure the whole conversation. But the thing is, I was thinking about this afterwards. I could do the whole presentation, but realistically, it's the process. The process that I take when I list a home, and it's not my process. It's something I kind of redefine. But there was a guy named Harold Ware with Max Avenue. I don't know. Did you guys ever have any of the Max Avenue stuff here? So it was right around 2013, 2014. He came through, and he came from a different business. He probably had the biggest impact on like the listing side of the business that like real estate market had seen in about 20 years. So what he did is what he basically did is he just systematized the entire listing process. This guy was like drinking from a fire hose. He had 76 variables in the listing process, and he wrote a business plan on how to manage every single variable. And his thought process was, if you have like almost like an operation manual for how to take in effect sell a listing and take it from start to finish, and can control the variables, you can have a better outcome. So his slogan was how to sell your home in 5 to 15%, how to sell your home for 5 to 15% more money. And he had this whole process of how he did that. The problem that I found with Harold, and a lot of realtors did, and one of the reasons why I think it fell off, is everyone kind of did what I did, took their version and adapted to their business. Because according to Harold, for instance, if you're going to do an evaluation, what you wanted to do was book in the 3 most competitive listings with your seller and preview each one. And he had a checklist of a plus minus, and you would start, and on this front, you'd say, okay, this is the entryway. Do we rate this as 1 point higher, 1 point lower than yours? And you with the seller would go through and fill out these checklists. You do all 3. So by the time you were done, it took you about an hour and a half to go through 3 properties, but your seller understood the competitors directly. So the pricing conversation was a lot easier, and it was a lot easier to systematize. Also, you could get into solds, it was great. But then when it came down to doing the preparation planning of like, what are we gonna renovate? You had been in those homes, so you know, okay, that kitchen was pretty phenomenal. Do we want to renovate our kitchen, or do we want to? So it gave you a lot of in-depth. The problem was it was cumbersome. And he did this for every single method. And I could never adapt that level of detail. It would be awesome. And if you can, you should. So this is my watered down version of Max Avenue and Harold Ware. But what's nice about it is the only time that this process doesn't work is if the seller decides it's not right for them or the timing's not right. Because the way that this is set up is if you follow it, there's 7 steps. If you follow 7 steps, you're going to sell every single home you take. I had run off a slogan for a long time: successfully sell your home in 6 weeks or less. And this is how I did it. Was if you follow this process, pretty much any home, as long as homes are selling, will sell in less than 6 weeks. But it's a process, and you're putting them on the tracks and you're following these goals. So I would pull this presentation out when I was doing this with clients. The other thing I would like to just kind of mention about this is when I'm showing this to a client, the reason I don't worry too much about scripts is I'm kind of excited. Just like if you got a new car and you knew everything about the car, it's easy to tell someone else about the car, and you can do it a little more authentically if you just know the process. So I would tell them that this process has worked really well. This is what it's done for me. This is where it was created. And as long as you and I become a team and we run this, we're going to do really well. It's going to be a nice win. So when I'm sitting down with a client, you guys will get copies of this so you can go through it. It reads just as you would speak to a client about it. So basically it says, there's no fixed price for any home. It's important because we take this for granted, but the truth is there is no fixed price. If there was, you just go and get an appraisal done. They would give you a price. That's what you would sell for. It all sells within a range. And if I'm explaining this slide to a client, I'm saying, well, if you take a look in Kamloops, for instance, there's lots of neighborhoods where a whole bunch of homes are built very similar. So you'll see them all sell, and they'll sell within like $10,000 of each other. Fast forward 20 years later, there might be a $50,000 gap in each one because some have been updated, some were cared for differently, and it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference on the end price range. So if they understand price elasticity, they'll get more on your side. Because again, another thing I remind them, it's not easy to sell a home for top dollar, and that might not even be their goal. But this is what we're talking about, is tapping into that extra money. Does anyone have any questions about that, or any other comments? What I'm thinking I might do, because I was thinking about this on the way, I think I might just blast through this whole thing, and then we can go back and talk about that, and then we can go to the pricing portion. And I'll give you guys like the high level of each slide of what I talk about, and then if we want to go in more depth, we can. Okay. So as you're kind of going through this, you'll see the second slide I'll show to sellers. and sometimes I just breeze over this, but it is important, especially if someone calls me. So they say, because when you're doing the intake, one of the things I like to ask them is, what's your goal? What do you want to do out of this? And I get them to rank it. I think Momentum had something very similar. So if they say to me, the highest thing for me is getting the highest price, I'm absolutely talking about the slide, because they want to get the highest price. That's not a comfortable method. That's work, but we can do that. If they say it's time frame, I'll probably breeze over this a little bit more because they want to sell quickly. But they say price, I say, okay, well, here's the thing. If we're going to go for price, there's a few things that I'm going to get you to do. I'm going to try to take on a lot of the heavy lifting, but we're going to work together on this. And it's going to result in real dollars for you. But in that moment, when we're doing this and coordinating these things and you're doing the work, it's going to feel like a lot of work. This kind of reminds us what we're doing it for. So an extra $10,000 invested in the market. And this is Harold Waird's thing. What can you do if you get an extra 10 grand now and reinvest that into the market? What does that look like over 40 years? And this is based on average returns, 25,000 and 50,000. So again, this is just another way of getting them on the side of what we're talking about and what it can amount to if we put in the work. So gauge your client, figure out whether this makes sense or not. This one I always talk about though, and these are the 5 most important things for any home. You're going to sell a home, you need to do these things. Number 1 is the seller education on market conditions. It doesn't really matter how much I know about the market. It matters how much they know about the market. And there's 2 ways, and this kind of goes into a philosophy in listing in general. I could tell you what to list a house for. The problem is, I tell you it's worth 600,000. We put it on the market and we sell in 2 days. I'm stoked you're not. That's the way that it goes. If I didn't educate you, we didn't win because you probably think I undervalued it. If they don't understand where the market's at in general, in like a high level, which we'll talk about, where they don't understand buyers' psychology going in, they're going to think of taking a completely different tactic than, because again, the media is right now, and it's starting to happen. You'll see it in your sellers. It's making it seem like the spring market's back, which it is, and I'm sure you guys have experienced it's busier, calls are starting. There hasn't been a direct increase in the price. There's just more liquidity, more people are pulling the trigger. So if the seller's not educated to that, they're thinking the market's going up.
Water.
You're fucking talking.
So they're not aware of the market. They don't understand psychology. It's really easy, especially right now, to fall into that. And it might go higher, it might not. There's no real indicators that prices are going to go up, but there's a lot of indicators that it's a good time as far as getting a sale goes. Buyers have less hesitancy. So my sellers, I really stress them, you have to understand this and you have to pick your price. I can't pick your price, I have to educate you. The second one is to prepare the home to attract the high offers, which we'll talk about. Then you price to market, maximum exposure to qualified buyers, and negotiate from position of strength. Those are the 5 key things that the process goes over. Now to get into the process, I'll talk to them about 7 steps. And the 7 steps, I talk to them, this becomes more of like a conversation. So the way I did this in the past, and I've gotten a little lazy on presenting this, this is what I was telling you. This to me was when I was talking to them and we were competing and they wanted to know my process. I would go through the 7 steps and then we would go back to each one. If I'm just talking to a seller and I'm not pulling out the presentation, I'm still thinking of these things in my mind, but I'm kind of discussing it as a conversation. So whatever you're more comfortable with, you can. But step 1 is going to be the market landscape analysis. It's just better understanding the seller's goals and reviewing the overall market conditions. And when I'm explaining to them, these are the 5 things that we're going to look at, your goals and motivations, because that's going to make a big difference on how I advise you to do your approach to the market. We're going to look at national market trends, interest rates, then we're going to get down to neighborhood trends, then we're going to get down to buyer demographic. And the reason we start the funnel is exactly like I said, if we don't understand the buyer psychology, you miss a big part. It doesn't really matter what's happening in all of Canada and in Vancouver when you're selling in Burnaby, but it does matter if the buyers are being pumped with a whole bunch of negative media, and that's going to cause hesitancy. You have to prepare for that. But really, at the end of the day, we started a big funnel and we come down into who's our buyer going to be and what's the demographics for this neighborhood. If we know those 2 things, and we've taken a pretty good look at the picture. Now, another thing, as we're kind of going into buyer demographic, this is where I kind of remind myself, context is a big part when we're selling a home. What is the buyer going to see value and why would they see value there? Most of the time, the perfect buyer is who the seller was when they bought it. And they'll tell you interesting things like, we want to be in this catchment area. We love that the park was nearby. We want to, ideally, if you can find a friend or a neighbor that's in the area, that makes a huge difference on context, because someone buying that's 3 doors down from their kids or from their parents and they have kids, you can see a ton of different. So we want to know, like, what is our ideal buyer? who's gonna see the most value in this? An investor's gonna pay less than, like I said, the person with family down the street. And then also the neighborhood trends, because that's gonna tell a lot. There's certain areas in Kamloops that just sell faster. They just sell quicker, and if they're in that, then we should be preparing for those types of homes. Second one is going to be the buyer's perception of the value. This is where it gets kind of fun, because this is probably the biggest thing for that 5 to 15% that he talks about. It's how are they going to perceive the home, and they're going to perceive the home differently based on how we prepare the home. Now, one of the things that I really like to do, I don't know if you guys do this, this pricing's out of date, but pre-inspections. And the pre-inspection is an interesting one, because some will say, well, why would I hire someone to find our errors with my own home? And the obvious response to that is because we can control the cost on that. Someone finds it last minute and they negotiate, they want $5 for every dollar worth of work. The second thing with the pre-inspection is if we find stuff, we can disclose it. We don't have to repair it, or repair it at our cost. It can be either way. But these, I can tell you, these have never caused me any kind of issues. They're amazing, actually. Right, and at the worst case scenario, there was one I did on Beaver Crescent out in Dallas, and they found spalding in the foundation. There's cracking and spalding downstairs, and we're like, oh, this doesn't look good at all. We got an actual structural engineer. There was some issues. He said it wasn't going to be for a while, but these are the remedies we got. So it took us about an extra 3 to 4 weeks to go to market, and we listed for about $40,000 under what market value was, with the disclosure and all the information, and we ended up in a multiple offer and got the price, but it was $60,000 to $80,000 worth of work, and that would have terrified a buyer last minute. They would have been asking for $100,000. So even when you find stuff, it's so much better.
Do you run buyer's agents? Like, do you tell them you have inspection?
I do, yeah.
And then do you give it to them, and do you
Yeah.
have the inspector's permission to share?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways that you guys can do this. So this is how I structured it. I found a really good inspector, and I went to him and I said, hey, I want to pre-inspect my homes. I don't want to pay the cost up front, and I don't want the sellers, because some homes I really like to do it, the sellers don't want to pay the $600. So what I did with him is I said, can we do two things? Will you pre-inspect the homes and let me pay on completion? And to pad the side, I'll pay you 25% more than what your average one is. So that means if I sell 3 out of 4 homes that you do, you're still flush. If I sell 4 out of 4, you're ahead, and we track the numbers together, so we work like a team. But what he did is he gave me an actual marketing and feature sheet, so I promote his business while I'm doing it, and he just has a letter that says you can't rely on this. This is for the buyers. There's no warranties or represents.
Sorry, if it doesn't sell, you pay him 25%, or else you.
No, I pay, when it sells, I pay him 25% more for every listing. So he's ahead. I've done 100% with him so far, because it's weird. As soon as you start bringing in someone else, I feel, because I make sure it's on point and I talk to the seller, but I've never missed when I've done a pre-inspection. So he's ahead.
And is it, and pre-inspection,
Full
is it-
inspection,
it's a full inspection?
3-hour inspection.
okay.
Yeah, and he has the full report. And so how it benefits him is that we've done 100%. He gets the marketing up front. And he also charges an additional $150 if those people want him to walk them through the house. He'll re-inspect it, and then he'll transfer the inspection over to his.
Okay, so those, and do buyers usually take him up on that? Do they take that
Not
inspection?
really. A lot of times that what they'll
Do
do
they
is they'll
do
get
that?
their own inspection.
Yeah.
Because they're like,
Yeah,
you pay
for
the
sure.
guy who's gonna be, but
Yeah,
that's why
yeah.
I'm listening
As a
super.
buyer should, if I was a buyer, they do.
Yeah, and most of them do. The reason I share it up front is it causes some kind of awkward and some tension sometimes, but it's fine. Like I had one where I made that mistake. It just happened so quick, and I didn't tell the buyer's agent. And they did everything. I thought I had sent it to him. It was a whirlwind. And he came back and he asked me for $6,000 off the price, like at midnight. And I was like, why? And he sent me an email that was like, they found rot under this, and this, and this. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I looked through my emails. I didn't send you the pre-inspection. Here's the pre-inspection with photos actually showing there is no rot. And I really apologize. I should have shared this up front. I totally respect that your buyer wants to get money off. Fortunately, we can't do that because we know that there's no issue. And subject removals came, and about 3 weeks, I never talked to the realtor for a while. He was choked because it kind of made him look, it's a right. So it's just nice to share up front. Hey, we did our due diligence. That's why I share it.
No, I like it.
Other thing that you can do if you don't want to do that, because so typically I charge 6.5 and 3, 6.5% of the percent, 3% of the balance. If I do video, I charge 7 and 3. And if I do video and a pre-inspection, I charge 7.5 and 3. So I charge more for the pre-inspection, but I tell them you don't have to pay unless we get the money. Or at the end, it just gets paid out of the commission, and I'll pay the seller. So they upgrade my commission to do it. but it's worked really, really well. And I usually do it on homes that are 10 years older or have some questionable. I don't do it on 5-year-old homes or anything like that. So pre-inspection sets up the whole thing. This kind of walks you through why. Second thing is the strategic renovation. So like I said, he did minimum, scenario, moderate, maximum. The way I look at it is this: work first. So the first thing I want to do is take away work. If there's missing baseboards, paint, that kind of stuff, the last thing psychologically I want a buyer doing is seeing work. Second thing I want is curb appeal. The curb appeal is huge, and major components of the home. So your roof, your wind, that's where I think you get the most bang up front. Like if you've got obviously an AC that's broken, I'm going to tell you replace the AC before you go renovate the whole kitchen, because people, that's just going to be a downside. And then if we've got the curb appeal on point, we have everything cleaned up. We've got baseboards are clean, all the stuff on the wall, like your light switches, everything. If that's all done, then we'll go into kitchens and bathrooms, because obviously those are the biggest renos. Kitchens and bathrooms, one of the things they ask, what kind of stuff do I put in? Just depends on the comparables. So if I go through all the sales and the price point that we're at, and they all have silestone, well, maybe it makes sense to do silestone. If they're all laminate, then we're going to do laminate. So match what you're trying to do, unless you're going up into a price point. So the research can actually tell you where they should invest and what it should look like when it's done, because you know what other buyers have paid for in the area. Yeah. And then staging, I've had really good luck with staging. It makes a big difference, but most of the staging I do has to do with what kind of a preparation plan that we do with them. So when I'm walking through with a buyer, a seller, I like to go room by room, and I get them to pick out, like, what do you guys see? And then they'll usually, they can tell, like, oh, we should declutter this, we should take this off. That's how I do my staging, unless it's got a really unique. So the reason I have this copperhead is this layout was so weird. And that was literally the only thing I changed when I took it over. It was an expired listing, but the house plan just didn't make sense. We brought in a stager and she set it up. She found a way to set up a reading room, which made sense. And just, that's all we changed. And I changed the price by $5,000 and it sold in like 2 days. But when you walked in, it was so confusing that the stager made a ton of help. And I think stagers are awesome. I haven't personally found a real seamless way to bring them into my business. I've tried different things, but if you have connections to it or you have the eye for it, staging's huge. But definitely part of my process is walking through the house. Hey, let's get some ideas of how to grab this thing for you. And it's even funny, you know, like when you go up front of a house for the curb appeal, because that's a big part. When they pull up, what are they going to see? The sellers are way more critical on the house than you are. So they're like, well, we should take off all the stuff to the side. We should clean up the edging onto the, they see all the stuff. So you don't really have to say much. You just are kind of there for accountability, asking the right questions. Yeah. Okay. Marketing strategy. You know, with this is an old stat, but I would almost guarantee you it's more than it is now. But this is where most people found this is in 2014, but this is where most people found the real estate. They either bought it from a real estate agent, found it through a real estate agent, or 37% found it on the internet, then called their real estate agent. 2% knew the seller, 6% friend, some from a home video. So in this stat, this tells you right now that 75% of your market is internet and other realtors. So that's where you should focus your marketing on. Now, the real estate agent portion is really interesting. I don't know if you guys do this, but it's like a little golden thing. For me, I changed it up and I started using BombBomb, and we would pull the top 25 agents to sell a certain type of property and send them a package. It's okay. It's not as good as finding the top 5 agents and calling them. That used to be like the secret sauce. And hey, Rick, it's Jeremy Reid here with Remax. I'm taking a listing. I realized over the last year, you've basically done 60% of the business in this area. We're going to go to market in like 3 days. I know you're probably going to have a buyer. Can I send you the photos and stuff ahead of time? Realtors have egos, kind of. It's like the best call in the world. So like I've made so many good friends like from that call that I'd never talked to before. So it creates some camaraderie, but also everyone loves getting it. And they will bring their buyers through. And when they do bring the buyers through, they're going to try harder to sell the home. So that one there is worth every penny. And then the internet. I mean, realtor.ca, remax.ca. Realtor.ca is obviously the most. Remax is just behind it. So that's your internet marketing. I mean, we've got social media and stuff, but really, if you're there, you've got 90% of the battle won. And when it comes down to presenting it on those areas, I talk about Remax too, because this is an important aspect when you think about the experience of the people you're around, but also the network. People are always asking me, will you be showing this to people in China? Will you be showing, like, because everyone has this idea that Europeans and Chinese will pay way more. I let them know about the global scenario of Remax, that you basically market it everywhere. And so it's, the neat thing about Remax.ca, and I know a lot of them do that, but again, the Remax collection and Remax.ca actually transcribes your listing into the currency, into their language. So you want to go after the European markets, it's going to be made for Europeans, it's going to be transferred over. And the Remax collection it's a cool fix if you're double the value. So I do talk about that side as well. Used to talk about the percentage of the market we had. I just didn't have the stats, weren't up to date, so I took those out. I changed this to captivating photography. I still use a professional photographer. I don't think you have to anymore. I don't know if you guys have played with BombBomb much and that snap app. So BombBomb is a approved supplier of Remax. They're awesome. I actually send it to them sometimes if we have like a cloudy day. Like I wouldn't leave this like this now in the middle. So if you go on to Box Brownie, it's $2 a photo. They'll enhance the photo. They'll change the sky for you if they want. They do everything. And they have a snap app, which lets you take the photo and upload it directly to Box Brownie. And I've shown side by side, if you take it from the right angle with your phone and send it to them, they edit, they look completely professional. It's crazy. And so if you're going to do 10 photos, it's $20. I usually do the outside. I mean, for that cost, I'd probably do the whole thing, but the outside makes a huge difference. And then they can do virtual staging and all that kind of stuff. So I changed this to captivating photo. I think that's important. And I personally still use a professional photographer, but it doesn't need to happen, I don't think, anymore. But that's what you've got. When you go to MLS, you've got a write-up, you've got video, and you've got photos. So I talk about the write-up. The write-up comes back to finding out who's that buyer. We talked about that earlier. And I'm putting it in. I know a lot of people are using ChatGPT now for their write-ups. So you can, this is not as big of an issue anymore. You can do a write-up for this type of property in this area and tailor it towards a young millennial or something like that. And I'll write it in like a super happy tone or whatever. But there is still an art to this somewhat. I do like it. Because it's for us, it doesn't matter what ChatGPT does. It's going to be a way better write-up if I go to them and say, go to a family with young kids, because I know I'm going through school or something like that. This actually helped a lot because Pineview and Sahali both go to McGowan, which is one of the more better schools for K-7. And registration was 3 weeks ago. And I took a listing in Pineview that went to McGowan. So I put in the comments about how registration for kindergarten has started. This is actually in the catchment. Get in now and get in for the May 12th, because that's the start for kindergarten. That's what we found was people that were going in. I mean, I'm sure they knew it was there, but it's still nice that you can really hit it like that. Home staging and presentation. Again, we talked about that. This is it. I mean, when you're doing a ready set show, I found it's as simple as make sure the lights are on, make sure there's no funny smells, make sure it's decluttered. And I walk them through what the filming process is going to look like. So the realtors are going to come through. It's nice if the photos are on. They'll turn all the lights off. They'll make sure it's locked when they're done. Let's make sure there's no real strong pet smells, anything like just the common sense stuff. That's what I've always found. I mean, with him, Harold's so off the wall with this stuff. Like he wants storyboards and checklists. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. I think it's kind of gone a different way, because it's funny. Like when I first came to the business, what I was taught was feedback is no offer. That was like what the old realtors, like if I don't give you an offer, that's feedback that we're not interested. I've been finding more and more people are way more open to giving actual feedback. So it's important to follow up with them and find that stuff out. Negotiation strategy. So we talked that a little bit. I left this. This is the only thing. If you guys decide to use this listing presentation at all, you may want to customize. You may want. This is just an example. I think this stat. And I stopped tracking it, and as soon as I stopped tracking it, it got worse. I think your list to sell ratio compared to the board average is really important, because it shows two things. Number one, how good is your pricing up front, and how much are you able to fight for it. And even if it's not better than board average and you don't want to advertise it, it's still important, because as soon as you focus on this, it gets better. It's very, very odd how much better it can get. So, and days on market, how fast are they selling, and what's your average list to sell price? And if it's higher than the board average, this slide is great, because at the time when I did this, I was 1.3% higher. So I can sell them, like on average, we make about an extra 10 grand, $8,800 if just from working with me, just based on the stats in the past.
So do you take your personal, like past all your sales or past year or
Past year,
whatever?
yeah.
Past year and then
Last
take.
month, if it's really good,
Yeah.
like just looks really, really good. But yeah, usually.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, this is where the pre-inspection is really good. Because the thing with the pre-inspection that I love is, if I'm getting an offer, I'll get them to preview it ahead of time. And I'll actually go through, and highlight some of the stuff. So I get I used to set up this little template email that I would go where I would review it. And I would have a template saved where it would say, here's the pre-inspection, please see page 9, section 2. This has been repaired, 9, 10, and I would lay it all out. There's a psychology they used to use in the, or they still use in the car industry. You still see it sometimes where they will take photos of the smallest scratch that they can find. And the psychology is, if they're showing me this, then I have more trust in the overall. So that's another thing for the negotiation that's nice. And then the last thing is your team quality and system. So I just, for me, the team, my team, I don't have a team. I don't have a team anymore. I used to have a team, but then I do still have a team because I have my mortgage brokers and my home warranty providers and inspectors and stagers and all that kind of stuff. So I talk about them a lot, like Lane, my home inspector. I love that guy, and I can talk very educated about him, and I know he'll take care of my clients. So that's part of my team. The mortgage brokers I work with, I have great relationships with. So, and those people all make a big difference in the end. My photographer, everything kind of pulls together on the whole. So I'll talk to him about this. And I also, one thing that I like to do, I can send you guys a copy of it. I like to send all of my marketing plans in writing, and I find that's a huge standout because that's like, I can tell you I'm going to do stuff, or I can write out exactly what I'm going to do and when it's going to happen, and then exactly what I'm doing, and it just creates more trust. Marketing budget and financial commitment. I talk about this. I don't use this slide anymore. I did for a while, but the numbers are kind of off because of the model I run. I really, over the last 2 years, the reason I went away from a team is I really wanted to get profit. So my goal was to get to 50% profit, but it doesn't exactly this isn't exactly accurate anymore. So that's why I went away from it. But this was the marketing budget and financial commitment. What he had done is he had surveyed basically all these teams. I forget how many teams he did, how many agents, and he averaged the two out. And this is what he said on average will happen in an agent's business. So according to him, you're going to have about a 30% gross profit margin is what you're going to end up with when you factor in your broker transactions fees, your business team or overhead, your insurance, your vehicles, offices, home presentation. I used to like this because the numbers were actually I was less than 30%. So the numbers were actually very accurate. I said, it's not actually this, but this just gives you an idea. So when we're doing this, I have to make sure these things are selling, because if we're talking 30%, that means a $10,000 commission is $3,000 profit. It also gives you a smaller window if they ever try to negotiate, but it's like, we have to hit this. So this is kind of the breakdown. We're going to offer 3 and 1.5 to an agent. I use this because I used to do the upsells of $14.95 or $24.95. I don't do that now. So depending on what you want, you might want to just delete this one and just talk about the marketing and agent budget. I mean, the truth of the matter is we put all the money up front with no guarantee to get paid unless it actually sells. And that's, I think, the best way, because it's a success commission. And
I find sellers, like, I don't know if you guys can me, but I find sellers like don't care how much you make. They care how much they're coming out with.
yeah,
They're like, oh, okay, well, you have a split and you have tax to pay, you have this, but like. They're not like.
well, and
that's where like the negotiating skills come in and be like, look.
Or they think you're getting it all and they
Yeah.
don't realize that breakdown.
yeah, and and that's where this conversation, and even when I had it, I explained this to them in a very casual way. I just say, this is just something I'm mindful of because I don't want to go broke either, because I do.
Fair.
So it's
Yeah, I guess it's all in how you like present it.
it's all in how you present it and what your viewpoint is. But the other thing that I find too with like talking about these numbers and the commission as well, there's just a bit of a team aspect. So I'll give you a really short example. So I had a listing that I just took on Dunrobin, and he had called me off one of my radio ads. So I was competing, and there's 3 agents, and I charge a little bit more because I charge 7 and 3 because I want to do a good marketing plan. And so he emailed me back, he's like, hey, we like everything, we like the marketing plan, but the commission is a little bit higher than the other agents, is there anything you can do? And so I just emailed back, and I was like, yeah, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, because of the model I run, I can't reduce my commission. But that being said, like, we're in a pretty high price point, it's 1.3 million. Why don't we just pad the property by an extra 5 or 10 grand and let me earn it for you in the negotiation at the end? Because I'd rather do that than miss out on working with you, because I think we make a good team. And it was cool. He emailed back. He's like, just go ahead with the pricing. I just had to ask.
Yeah.
Like, your wife had to ask. The conversation with her afterwards. And
But that's like really key, is like flipping it to be like, let's just add,
Yeah.
like, because we're
$3,000.
often competing against people who are offering 3%. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, do you think I will negotiate 3% or more for you
Mhm.
in the end?
well, and it's nice too, because the
Or like you said, adding it to list price is really perfect.
when I say about the success commission and why it's so much better, I mean, that's kind of the key. And I've never, like, I know it's all about what's authentic to you. Like, I've never been a hard lip, absolutely not. But I have been very collaborative, and that's why I guess I don't discount my commission much, is it's really ever anymore, unless it's like a really close friend or something, and I'll do it a little bit. But I've taken this idea, and it's a lot easier now that there's so much equity in people's houses, I guess. But like, let's just impact it and try to get to the end, because until this thing sells, neither one of us gets paid. It's not like you kind of get checked tonight. So let's just position ourselves both so that I can get paid and you can get paid, and when it's all said and done, we can high five and be happy about it. And it's it never gets questioned at the end, because at the end they've seen you actually put in the work. Right now is where they really want to line up, especially if they're competing. And then pricing strategy. So this is why. This is interesting. This is cost of overpricing in a stable market. We're obviously in somewhat of a declining market. I think it's probably flattening out now, but in the last 6 months, it's been in a bit of a declining market, so it's different. But this is where the whole idea of 6-week sold came from, and why, like, when you talk, it's important to look at. This just lays out what happens when you price high, and this is actually based on stats. Like, he had it all broken down for us, but your market interest, I think everyone understands, is going to be the highest in the first 3 weeks. You're going to get all the buyers that are in the market within the first 3 weeks. After that, you're going to start getting new buyers that start coming on. So that bulk of the interest is going to happen right out of the get-go. So the pricing strategy that you choose right out of the get-go is actually the most important part. And the whole reason that I like this idea of the process is we're controlling all the variables. So if we've prepared it, we've got our buyer demographic, we're marketing it, everything's on point. The only thing left is price. And we want to really hit that first 6 weeks. So the idea of you can always start high and come down, if you read through this, gets obliterated with the idea of, if you hit your price reduction after week 9 or week 10, and then statistically, if we wait 8 or 9 weeks, we've blown through all our buyers, now we drop, now we're right around market value, but we've got only new buyers that are coming in, and they're looking at how long we've been on the market. Chances are you're going to have a second reduction if we wait too long for that first reduction. So it's important. And then that's the presentation, that's the process in general, and however you want to talk about it and bring it across. If they follow this, the house is going to sell, because there's no real way to it to not sell. This controls everything that you need up front, and then now it becomes the pricing side. So I'm curious, like, from your guys' standpoint, like, questions about that, like, what's your overall thoughts on this, looking through it? As far as like implementation, is there anything that's not clear? So my goal coming in was that someone will be able to just take this and actually start using it right away. But is there any questions, anything that seems a little gray?
She needs to be updated on stats, obviously, like.
24
Yeah,
months old,
and the slipping.
yeah, because we're gonna see. Can you do one for cameras too? Because I do want to start using this again. It's just old, but can we, like, what are we gonna get it updated with new graphics and stuff?
Like market share?
Well, the market share would be good, but also, like, I did all these graphics myself. Remember how you were talking about maybe using what's her name? Anya.
Yeah.
To kind of put like a nice
Yeah,
touch
we
on
get
it.
the numbers, we can make it look pretty.
Little more
Yeah.
modern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
way more modern stuff, but like,
Yeah.
but overall, if we could get
And
that,
like
I will
less,
start.
and a little bit less wordy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, this
That's
is,
the one thing that I was gonna say as well, is I think different sellers appreciate different type of data or how
Yeah.
it's presented.
yeah,
So I tend to be like a relationship person. I'm not necessarily like a statistical data driven realtor. So it can be challenging for me to kind of like lay this out for someone in a way that they would appreciate. So that's the way I would use it. I would maybe tailor it more to my communication style. But
Yeah.
there's like a lot going on.
Well, there
It's
is.
a little
You're
overwhelming.
really
maybe.
And that's what, I think that's
Yeah,
what, well, and that's
yeah,
one of the
so you
reasons
can
why I
see
stopped using this unless they wanted it. So I, to be honest, I haven't presented this in 4 years, so it's,
Sure.
but it's more like you say, a more conversational. So I
Right.
actually like.
Use
sitting
this
across the
almost
table.
as like as a,
Yeah, like you said, I asked like questions like how much do you want to know, or like where would you like to focus? Like
yeah, that makes
the
sense.
other thing that, to be honest, when I did this, Max Avenue, it was 2014, 2015. I had maybe 30% of my buyers or sellers were referral, like my clientele was referral.
Mhm.
Now it's like 87%. So I feel like but when we were doing Buffini, I noticed a lot of the agents in here were kind of newer and starting out. So when you're
Mhm.
competing a whole bunch, sometimes it's nice to have those tracks, but I agree with you, like, and where I've found is that, maybe a third of this actually gets talked about in conversation with sellers now. I find out in conversation what they find that's important, and then they'll usually ask me if they have questions.
Yeah, and then you can focus on.
Yeah,
The one thing, like in a situation where you are competing against other realtors, what I found that's really helpful, and this is what this delivers for sure, is being ridiculously prepared.
yeah,
Because usually that just puts you far above and beyond anyone else you're competing against, because as we know, realtors can come with really not much backing up what they say they can do, so. Just, I mean, the wordiness kind of, and like the additional information
Well,
kind of
simpli-
plays
I
a
think
part, right?
simplicity
It
would
just
be-
can blow people
yeah.
away, so it's good in that sense, but.
yeah, and it's exactly like you say, that was the one benefit of the wordiness is that it's so in depth.
Yeah,
and I
it's
would
like,
just
oh, wow,
explain
this,
to them.
this guy did his homework.
Yeah, I would explain to them like
Holy smokes.
I don't, like we can go as deep as you guys want. And that's another thing that I really appreciate from Harold and sitting down with him is like, when he goes so in depth that it's like you don't really have to talk about the stuff, but if someone wants to, you can go really far. And
Mhm.
that's the neat thing about it.
That's.
So
the
and
value to it.
that confidence actually makes most of the time they don't.
Which you almost need like two different presentations where you can read the client, on your step one of walking through the house, and then you're like, okay, he's a data guy, we need to pull it.
Mhm.
Well,
Qualifiers can.
what I was saying to Michelle would be awesome too, obviously not down the line, if people actually start using it, it'd be awesome because there's Prezi. So there's this thing called Prezi that's like, it's like a modern day PowerPoint. And so PowerPoint's linear. So I'm going through all my steps, whereas Prezi's like orbs and you go down. So
It's like a
you have like the
brainstorm
light
bubble.
version, yeah, and then
Yeah.
someone's like, I want to go really deep, and then
Then you
click
start like,
right
okay,
to-
I know.
so you can kind of dig in, so it's a little more customizable.
Yeah, another aspect, I guess, too, if you're gonna use it in different ways, is really know your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just,
cause that's
like,
what I was gonna say.
Spending
too.
the time to get to know it enough
Yeah,
to use
cause
it.
if you
properly.
know all the little bullet points underneath your points, then you can just have the
You know,
points.
like,
Picture.
let's go to the next one.
Or a graph. And then you can
skip.
I
And
used to do it
also-
by 7 steps. I drive like a lot of windshield time. I actually did used to do this in my car when I was driving. I'm like, what are the 7 steps? And like remembering it. So the repetition makes a big difference.
And a poll, and we can ask Zoom people too, like, do you guys use the presentations on like an iPad or your computer, or do you bring like physical sheets? Both. Well, you bring both, and then just gauge on what the client.
Yeah, well, the presentation, and then you've got your document, like well, for me, I use the listing solds and. Yeah, as paper.
Oh, okay, so you
Yeah.
have some data to
Yeah, so
share,
the
plus
data is
the-
paper, and then our presentation kind of guides us through that data.
Can you ask Zoom people? If they use paper or.
Do you guys,
okay.
Zoom people, do you guys use people? I don't know how to know. Do you guys use paper or is it all technology now when you sit down?
Somebody speak.
Okay, Chris,
Uh,
this is the-
I
Christy.
use both.
You use both?
Yeah, I use both.
You know
I'm more
what?
comfortable with paper.
Well, you know what's interesting?
You know-
So you know what I used to love? So I'll send you a copy of it so you can see, because maybe she can play with it. Max Avenue it looked like a dinner place snack. It was like this and it was laminated and it has all of this laid out and it's double-sided. It was pretty sweet because like it's just kind of neat to be able to like flip it over and they just see this wealth of like, this is the plan we're following, and it kind of does a guide thing. So you could do something like that right next to you, but
So how do you deal with the pushback of, the changing market where they're stuck on last year's market, they're stuck on that price, and then you're like, okay, fine, I'll work with you on this price, but try to get a pre-signed price reduction, but that's always a little bit tricky too. And then you kind of go stale with that listing because it's listed too high.
There's two thought processes I have. Like I said, I don't have a real standoffish personality.
Mhm.
So the last thing I would ever say is you guys are nuts, you're looking to get that price.
Sorry, and
Oh, yeah, sure. There we go.
pretty clear we can hear you.
And that's just me personally. It's just a personal thing. So number one with overpriced stuff is and I'll talk about that in the pricing strategy part two. I let them know I have to be 100% sold. Like I have to feel really good about your price because if I'm not sold, I can't represent you. You're better to find someone else because there's nothing worse than I can take a listing 50 grand over and the realtor's like, what are you thinking? You're like, I don't know. Like, yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. So it's like, I'm like, you got to give me something. Like if we're going to go 50 grand over, like give me some kind of ammo so I don't just get caught like that when a realtor comes and asks me. And sometimes they have good reasoning. They've got something that they can do that can at least get me there. Or sometimes I have to pep myself up. So I have to mentally be there. If I know that call is going to come and it's not going to work, then I know I'm not going to represent them. And I always think about it like, if I got a call from that realtor and my seller was in the room, are they going to be happy of how I have to handle that call? And if they're okay with it, like again, this is where I'm like, someone's gonna call me, I'm gonna say, I don't know, guys, this is what they want, like bring us an offer. If you're okay with me saying that,
Yeah.
then I can work with you somewhat. But at the same time, how long do you want to stick out like that? Because if we're talking about 1% of our buyers are going to actually be interested, we're going to have to go through a lot of buyers to figure out if that 1%'s out there.
Priscilla says price or patience.
Yeah.
Price or patience is a great one. Yeah, and it's 100% true.
Or being excited, like not showing your true emotion at the time of them giving you that number, like jaw dropping, like you want what? Like
We had in Buffini, we had a conversation about the Facebook Marketplace effect. And like when you put something on Marketplace, because most people have, like you have all these inquiries and then you sell it right away and somebody picks it up and you're like, holy shit, did I underprice it? And like, but you're happy and excited. Like, do you want the Facebook Marketplace? But yeah, they didn't negotiate. They paid your price. They came, picked it up next day. It was no stress. So do you want like the Facebook Marketplace effect on your house? Or do you want to have to be like lowering it and lose the algorithm of Facebook Marketplace? Nobody's going to see it anymore. And then somebody's gonna come.
but I don't care. I see
Is
everything
this
that's
available?
happening. Well,
I don't know. That was kind of interesting. That came up on the feed one day. I was like, that's kind of an interesting analogy.
Yeah, and it's, I mean,
that's the whole like sold in 2 days and they're not happy and you're excited.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
So
where
they
the
priced it.
way we take the pricing, the way you present the pricing is so important to protect against that. But if I'm being totally honest, what I'm looking at with what you're talking about, they want those, as long as I feel like they're educated and informed of what we're doing, like very informed, like we're going for that needle in the haystack. Like you guys are aware, and you're aware that I've got no ammo to like hold up this price. I'm going to get calls from realtors. I'm going to get ridiculed. I'm going to get all kinds of stuff. And this is going to be my only response unless we have something different. And realistically, what are you going to do if this doesn't hit? And how long are we willing to stick it out? Those are probably the three most, and do I like them? If I know I'm gonna be stuck with someone for 6 to 8 months and I don't click with them, it's too draining. Because my whole goal from this, from like the last 3 years when I started rebuilding my business, is the coach I was working with had nailed it. I want a guilt-free business. I don't want to walk around like doing things where I'm like, oh, I hope someone doesn't. And I would always feel like that. Like I'm like, oh, I can get your price, and then realtors call me. I'm like, yeah. just bring me an offer. And it's so I think the communication portion is huge. And then the second part to your question, and we'll go a bit more when we do the pricing, is barometers. I always set barometers, like how many showings and are we going to get before we feel pretty confident that maybe that buyer's not out there. And I like to do 8 to 12, even if we know like within the first 4 or 5, if you have a pretty busy setup, 8 to 12 is a nice gauge. You can kind of tell if you're kind of there. Most sellers seem to feel comfortable with that. And sometimes, and that's like, when we talk about 6 weeks sold and someone wants to do that. So I just did that with someone that came in from last year. They're on the market with another realtor. They missed the market. Now they want out. They want to move to Nanaimo and they want to be gone. The 6 weeks sold process is not for everybody. It's for these guys, but it's fairly aggressive. Like we went, they were listed at, just to give you guys an idea, they are assessed at 864. Their last list price was 789 after dropping from 889. So they went 789. And so we looked at it and I'm like, well, we've got a few different options here. I don't know exactly where you guys land. So we're gonna have to test this in levels. So you're gonna get a lot of showings. We're probably gonna have to move quickly. But first thing I think we need to figure out is, are we worth more than 750? If we're not, we need to figure out 725 to 750. If we're not there, we got to figure out 7 to 725. Like there's levels on this. And there wasn't enough data for me to say for sure you are a 750 plus home. Like it's just, it was a unique layout and all these things. So I said, the only way we're going to do this is with a barometer. So we prepped the whole place, got it ready, did touch ups, get everything we could to make it look the best that it could. And went to market at 769.9. We had our 12 showings and those happened in 2 days. So on the third day, no offers, reduced our price to 749.9. Another 4 or 5 days went by. No offers. We went to 729.9. And we thought 724.9, but we didn't get a good boost. Then we got the offer at 725. Then the deal collapsed because of financing. And then we went back under contract at 725. So they were willing to do what it took to hit that 60. How's it going?
Oh, good. How you doing? I'm Rob.
I'm Jeremy.
Sorry for my,
No worries.
Talk of predetermined price reductions, like, and be on the same page.
Yeah, and so they're not shocked when the call comes. The pre-signed price reductions is tough, and I again I kind of steer away from that just because I'm like, you're guiding the ship. Like they could have pulled back on me and said after 2 days I want to go a little longer, but as long as I'm reminding them of what we're doing, it's usually okay. Anything else on that? Yeah, please.
How have you been dealing with sellers that are afraid of getting an offer too quick? That's actually happened to me quite a lot in the last year because they want to find something that kind of is more challenging to find. So they almost like want to price a bit higher to give themselves time to find the right property to purchase.
Right.
Have you dealt with that kind of
A
situation?
little bit. So I've got someone right now that's doing that, that's actually moving down to Penticton, and they can't find something down there. And we've got a little bit of time. For them, it makes sense somewhat because there's nothing really on the market right now. So we're like, well, let's try it out until you guys find something. Typically, I try not to because it's like you don't want to burn through those.
Well, it doesn't, in the end, in my opinion, doesn't do them any justice, like like with their home sale, because potentially they get less, they get stale on the market because we're, priced a little higher than we should be. Which, yeah, again, I have it happening right now. So I try to remedy with requiring a negotiation of a longer completion to give them time to find something. But they just, like, in my opinion, because inventory is still quite challenging, they just feel too pressured to even do that. And I'm like, okay, well, again,
Still need to secure the buyer, like.
yeah. And then too, anyways, it's just, I find it such a tough situation to kind of
Now,
navigate.
giving them like dates on market, like average days on market anyways. is
Sure.
72.
Yeah,
That's
so maybe that would like
helpful.
calm their fears as far
Yeah.
as.
And then, yeah, like. Explain that it's in such a shitty negotiating condition when you're ready to go, and then we have to drop 50 grand.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's wrong with it?
Mhm.
Essentially, they're like,
That's
well, you've been on the market for 90 days and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess you can explain the
Yeah.
strategy.
It all depends on the home. Like I've got one on Saddleback too, same kind of thing. And I was like, you guys can't, because they haven't been on the market for a while. They're $1 million plus home. Like you do not want to start
So you're
figuring out a place in 4 months. And now we have to try to do some of the price because I can't drop $1,250,000 to $1,190,000 and expect this huge burst of, it's not like going from 750 to 699.
Yeah.
So what we did is I did an exclusive with them. And I created a marketing package and I said, let's start getting it out to realtors now, but let's not burn our days on market. I contacted the top 25 agents that were interested, sent them the package. Yeah, and then if you can get buyers ahead of time that way.
Yeah, okay, because
And-
that's one of the challenges we face is once they find the property, their home isn't even listed, they're not ready to go. It's like, what's the opportunity there? You don't really have one.
So with,
Yeah, it's-
and kind of going back, I found that too. So with Saddleback, we didn't do a pre-inspection on that one, but photos are in, write-ups in, and I don't know if you guys can do that here, but I've got it saved as a draft in
Sure.
my
Oh, yeah.
in interface. Yeah.
Reactive, but just workspace.
Yeah, so then it's I've got all the paperwork. So the listing contract just goes into DocuSign, they can sign off. So then it's like a day.
Okay.
They're on the market the next day.
But if it doesn't, you're still in that same boat.
Yeah, and you can fish a little bit.
If they do get an offer as exclusive, again, you're coming from a position of strength, negotiation wise, to give them tons of time to.
Yeah, in that case, yeah. And I just
Okay. Next time around, 'cause just getting hammered with that last year.
Yeah.
Driving me nuts.
Well, that was probably the toughest part. Like now it seems like it's kind of catching up a little bit but that was the weirdest thing from like August to November is you had this huge gap of buyer's expectation. So sellers wanted to buy or sell like 6 months ago, and buyers want to buy 6 months from now, and both thought the market was going in different directions. So it was like, it was weird. But yeah, you know, it's funny, like the one thing that I have found with a lot of the sellers that I have been dealing with is the patience seems to be there. And I actually ended up pulling the 6 weeks sold as my front and center. And I offer it more as like an advisory thing, because like pine grass is same scenario that you're talking about, price your patience. They want a patience. And so they want to go 5 months. It's not that they don't know why it's not selling. They know why it's not selling. It's price. But they want to just wait it out. Yeah. And they've been good to me, and I remind them constantly, and I tell them ahead of time, I'm going to remind you constantly. Like every time we get feedback, I'm going to share the raw feedback from it. Yeah. Because as I let people know my weaknesses too. Like I'm a pleaser. And so we're going to go on this. I'm going to get super optimistic, and I'm not going to want to tell you that the last 9 people said we were out to lunch on that price. So I'm just going to share it with you directly. And it's not me trying to be harsh or anything like that. It's just, we have to look at what the feedback is. And so with them, I'm just forward it on. Like, the buyer thinks we're 150,000 over, 100,000 over. But my relationship's still really good because we had that conversation. He knows what we're doing. Yeah.
We started a realtor tour again. Like we're after the meeting, we go on tour of the new listings that realtors submit, and we do doing feedback forms, and we get like maybe 4 or 5 feedback forms. But have you used them for your guys'?
Yeah, well, I haven't sent them direct, because some of them I'm like, "Ew, I'll just put that in.
Yeah. Price reduction on one, didn't you?
It's been super valuable for me, because then it's like kind of a lump.
Well, and then you're like, this is what all the other realtors are saying, not
Yeah.
just me, right?
I mean, I've had some pushback on it too.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they just want to sell it at a better price, whatever. Every certain sellers will find something to contend with.
Oh, yeah.
I think
It's been helpful, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything can get them some feedback. But the biggest thing for them is just knowing what they're doing, because that's the word. And it's funny because I've had calls from people before that they were so choked, and they'll list with me at a lower price, and it counts as probably like Vernon. It's a small town. That's the other thing I always remember. So like I've had this a few times actually, where they took a price and the realtor told them they were really confident in the price, and they found out through the grapevine that they were telling all the realtors, yeah, I think we're high. Like, just bring us up. Like, it all comes back, and that sucks, right? Like so then they lost trust, and then so it's really easy to do that. So that's why I like get their permission up front. What am I supposed to say when someone calls me?
I can't remember who told me that. I don't know if this is Beanie, but they say to their client, like, I'm either gonna disappoint. I think Megan actually, she's like, I'm either gonna disappoint you now by telling you here's what your prices, if your house is worth, or I'm gonna disappoint you in 2 weeks with the price reduction with a bunch of feedback and things overpriced. So like, when would you like to be disappointed? Like, I'm being honest with you, like. Yeah, like.
But I've been like too honest sometimes, and I've lost the listing from being too honest.
For sure.
So it's like a weird fine line of pleasing them at the time and then giving them the negative later, or
Yeah, for sure.
trying to be upfront and then them tell you, oh, we're in no rush, we don't care, we'll just sit and wait. Like, okay, the rooms are too small, that's the feedback.
Yeah, which is something you can't change.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to do a major renovation.
But that being too honest thing is getting me a little bit.
In trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
The other thing too, I think the approach is really important. Like I think, and this is where the pleaser side maybe does come in. Like, I'll usually approach things optimistically. Like I genuinely, it's not even like a script or anything. I genuinely want to try to get them as much as they can. And so if I can get you over $1 million, I want to. I just don't see how we can do it yet. So I'm open to option. I can't see it. And what I think is going to happen is I'm going to sit here and I'm going to get really excited because you just told me everything awesome about your home. Like, yeah, let's listen to $1.1 million. And then like 2 weeks, we're not going to get an offer. And I'm going to go 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And we're going to have to look at doing this reduction. And I'm going to have blown through all of our best buyers because I'm too optimistic. Now, if you're okay with doing that, that's fine. But so as long as you guys are okay with that as a really real possibility, that's fine. But I don't want my optimism to put us in that position, because reality is going to set in and I can't control what the buyers are going to offer us.
Or all of a sudden you lose your momentum because your optimism is sort of dwindling.
Yeah. Well, and that's
show the client that.
Yeah. And again, then when I come back, it's like same optimism, and not like fake, just we tried. It didn't work. It's time to move. Yeah. Anything else on this one before I go to the last little part? Oh, I'm already at 10:59. Okay. I set 2 hours. I don't actually know if we need 2 hours, to be honest. What I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a method that I have for talking about price, which is here, I'm gonna put this down here, which is part of why I don't have any problems with price reductions. Like that's one thing that I can consistently say. If you look through my listing inventory, if we don't get an offer, you'll see a price reduction. If we don't, there's a reason. So like that one I was saying that we're 100,000 over. They eventually gave into a renovation. So we just finished the renovation last weekend because we was like price or patience. Like you're looking for someone that sees so much value in this location, this cul-de-sac, and having a pool that they're going to be willing to put in the money on the renovation. That's what you're looking for. And the issue is that we're over $1 million either way. So either you guys are going to have to put the money in on these particular things, or we're going to have to wait it out. And that's what we're waiting for, is does that buyer exist that either has connections, can do the stuff themselves, sees so much value? Like, what is it that we want to do? And 4 months later, we decided to make the move and get the renovation done. Oops, what just happened there? Oh, because I went to count, sorry. So this is, do you guys use Interface Express? Is that what happens here? Okay, so it's different.
We might, they're gonna merge, either we're either gonna go to interface or you guys.
Every couple months, like, here, just learn something new.
Yeah.
Like, can
We have to switch it to showing time. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah.
Instead of touch base, but Eden. Let's see, showing time, she said it's way better. She will show us all how to use it.
Sorry, what is showing time?
Showing time is,
They sent that email down.
Yeah.
yeah, Eden has it, our back.
Do you guys do showing time?
Yeah, I like
And you
it.
like it, yeah.
Yeah, I like it quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll have lots of training. Like, do it, Eden.
So a couple of things on pricing that I found just makes a huge difference is I'll do all my research ahead of time before I'm actually sitting down with them. I do lately I've been doing two. I go in a preview, then I come back a second time, just because it's tough to just pull a number. You have to be a little more accurate now. So I'll go in, meet with them. I'll go and I'll do all my research. But one of the things that I found that makes a huge difference is, like, you know, the magician that shows the trick, but they show nothing's up their sleeve first. It's kind of the same kind of idea. Like when I go in, I have pre-done stuff, but I show them how I got to that pre-done stuff. Because that's one skepticism I would always get, where you just picked out the comparables that made the most sense for your case. So what I'll actually do is I'll pull this out. I have it just tied to my phone. So I've got internet wherever I go. And I'll go in and I'll say, I've brought an actual evaluation, but I want to show you guys how I got to this evaluation. And I'll go in and I'll actually do exactly like I'm doing this. I'll be like, okay, so what I did is I started obviously in Kamloops. And when I was picking areas, I picked Aberdeen, but I also picked Juniper and Pineview because we find that those areas all sell very similar. This is actually how I'll have the conversation with them. I only want to look at single family homes because duplexes don't tell us much. I want to look at what's conditional and what's sold. But if you take a look up top, you'll see there's 7,000 sold. So I have to kind of narrow in what type of sold we're looking for. And so what I'll do first is say, okay, 3 months, the market's been somewhat similar. So there's been 20 sales in the last 3 months. And if I can get enough of a sample size, I really like comparing 2 stories to 2 stories. If I don't have enough, then I'll compare 2 stories to ranchers. So if I did this already and I know what it's going to come out as, I'll say, so then that's why I picked 2 stories to eliminate everything else. And we got to 3 listings. Now, in this case, I would obviously, I might go with that. Actually, that's not bad. 3 sales and 4 conditionals. That's quite a bit of data. And then I would search it. And what I'm kind of doing when I'm doing this is I'm doing elimination to how I got to the evaluation. So I would have already done all this and I'm showing them. So first thing is 1055 Aberdeen. That's a townhouse that got put as a single family. Agents do that, so I'll delete that. I want to go with areas that are similar in price and point, and I'll narrow it down as I'm doing it until I get to the exact ones that I used in the evaluation, then I'll start it. I don't know why, but it makes such a big difference for them to know that you weren't excluding things. You didn't cherry pick. This is how I got to where I'm going, and this is why I got to it. Now, the second thing that is huge, if you're going to talk about pricing, is my mindset on this is always that I have to be on the same team as my clients. Like I have to be, like, they have to choose their price, like we talked about, because I don't want that disappointment. But also, like, I want them to know exactly what they're looking at so that they don't talk to the neighbor the next day And they're like, why did you list your home so low? So there's two things that we want to look at. This is bad sample size, by the way. Like you would not pick a $3 million home and a $600,000 home. So obviously I would have done the pricing on it. But what I found is the solds are what tell us what market value is. The conditionals tell us what's happening right now, and the active listings are our opportunity. That's kind of the three ways that I talk about it. And the reason for that is, and you guys would have saw this big time in the last 6 months, there's this huge illusion over the market right now, and sellers are trying to get last year's prices. It's still happening in Kamloops anyway. And so you've got all these listings, and the sellers are like, oh, my neighbor's listed for 900,000, but the last sale was 750. But the ones that sell so quick, they don't see or they don't catch. So there's like this underbelly of what's actually selling compared to what's actually listing. So we need to cut through the illusion. And the illusion is cut by what's a buyer actually willing to buy. And that's the only definition of market or market value we have. So let's go through the sales. And as I'm going through these sales, if I had the good comparables, this is where the engagement comes. And this is where I do always have my laptop with them. I say, again, it doesn't matter what I know or what I think, it comes down to what you guys think and what you guys know. So let's take a look at this. This is one that's sold. It's at 1450 Capilano Place. Do you guys know the location? Yeah. Did you guys look at this listing when it was on? Did you guys notice it? Do you know anything about it? And sometimes they come up with good information. Like I've had sellers tell me things I didn't realize about the home or about the scenario, because everyone kind of knows something about the neighbors. But we'll talk about it. And then the key thing is I'll go through all the photos, just like I'm doing with you guys. I'll say some things that I noted about this home that was interesting. I really liked the hardwood floors that they had. I noticed their kitchen was really wide and open. I noticed this location was very quiet because it was on a cul-de-sac. These are things that I noticed. Is there anything that you guys know about this home that I don't know? And then I say, do you think your home realistically should sell for more or less than this, in your personal opinion? And they'll usually make some joke of, well, I'm biased, but I think it should sell for more. I'm like, okay, well, why? I just need the facts. And sometimes they have good stuff and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll literally get to this point, like, I don't know, just because I want more. Or I've heard that. Like, it's, yeah, you'll get the true objections. Yeah, but when they've gone through it and this accountability is there and you're having it in a genuinely curious, non-judgmental way, it's amazing how they'll be like, I guess it probably should sell for a little less. I'm like, okay, well, this sold for whatever the amount is. And like, okay. And then I go to the next one. I try to do 5 to 6. And by about 3, they get a little itchy. And 4, and you're like, I know, but this is going to save you so much time. It's going to take an extra 20 minutes now. It's going to save you weeks of being disappointed down the line. So we just got to power through. Like, I want to skip this too. I just want to tell you what I think it's worth, but I'm not going to. And I go in and I'll go through it. Now they've gotten to the 6th one. The painful part's over. Now let's look at the opportunity and the conditionals, obviously. Now let's look at the opportunity. Now we know that all these houses are selling for 750, but like you already said, your neighbor's listed at 900,000. Now they've been on the market for 4 months. It's a nice house, so clearly price is the issue. But where can we price where we look like the best deal on the market and we try to outperform the 750 benchmark? That's really what the conversation's like. And Pinegrass, one that I just listed, was a perfect example of that. There was multiple properties that were nicer than theirs that were listed at $1,025,000, but all the sales were 875 to 900, like very similar because it's kind of a similar age and vintage. They were assessed at $1,040,000 because of course they assessed them July last year. We went at 929.9. They sold for 915 and they're stoked because we beat that 875 to 900. They don't care that the neighbors are $1,050,000 because they haven't sold. So that's why it's really important for them to understand the difference between the two and understand that $1,050,000 is going to help you get an extra 15 or 20 grand if we do this right.
Sorry, what was the list on that?
929.9 and sold for 915. But there was numerous sales 875 to 900. But their neighbors, which was a very similar house, were listed at $1,050,000.
Did they call you on the $1,050,000?
My clients?
Yeah.
No. You always like a choke,
So
you mean?
So, 929.
Yeah.
Buddy down the street's $1,050,000.
Well, they're neighbors. Yeah, this is why it's so important to have this conversation.
They were underpricing their competitor.
They were underpricing their competitor, but they're outpricing what the last sales have been. So they were a win, but they needed to see all that because the neighbors are going to be choked. And no, and I've had this happen with a little old lady that I had. One of the neighbors came and knocked on our door. It's like, why'd you let your realtor take advantage of you? Like, because they thought I was just dropping the price on it, right? They have to be educated, and these are kind of examples that I will give to them of why it's so important. Because your neighbor at $1,050,000 might walk by you at the park, and he's going to have something to say. We're at 930. Like, this conversation is probably going to happen. They're going to ask you why you went so much lower.
And are you getting a lot of pushback on, well, the appraised value? Or
The assessed value?
Or sorry, assessed value, yeah.
Yeah, I am, but have you guys seen this? This ends any kind of conversation about it. So in interface, if you go to HPI, have you guys played with this at all?
Home pricing index?
Yeah.
I looked at it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a few different ways to use this. Number one is the price estimate. If you just want to kill time, or I've done it for you, this thing's actually somewhat accurate. So if you can find a home that is sold in like the last 10 to 15 years, and hasn't had a bunch of work on it and just recently sold. So I just went in the hot sheets and found one. Actually here, let's do that. Let's see if we can find one real quick, because I want to show you that what's kind of neat about this. So if I go into my hot sheets for today, and I go to, okay, Raymount. So this one just sold for 508. If I go to relist history, this one sold for 280 in, where is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So this one sold in,
Number
do
27.
you guys see it? Where did it?
Top right.
Top right. Oh, 280 for September of 2016. And well, let me pull the old photos. But let's assume, right? So 280 in September of 2016. So then if I go back here, price estimate, and we'll go Rayleigh 2-story. And you guys have this here too. Yeah, so if you,
Yeah.
okay, so this is a,
Here's my land court report. Here's your assessment.
Yeah.
And be like.
so it's a 2-story in Rayleigh, and it was September of 2016. Now this will get a little skewed if they did a big reno, and I didn't check that, but let's just see what happens. And it was 280,000. So if it sold for 280,000, it estimates, so it estimated 440 is what it would sell for now. So and it sold for 508. But well, this is where it kind of gets interesting. So then if you go by time frame and benchmark, and you just go Kamloops, and you can pick different areas, but you can just do single family. Let's just say single family homes. And let's see if this actually works. Sessional timeout. Anyway, what you can basically get to is you can get to a point where you can, if you play around with this, it'll give you a time frame, and it'll show you what the benchmark was in July of last year and how it's depleted month after month to now. So in Kamloops, it's been a 15.2% change. And you can actually go by areas. I don't know why it's not doing it for me right now, but you can pick areas. So I can see in Aberdeen, it would be like a 16.8%. So it's like this was assessed in June or July of last year. Even if that assessment was right, it's still going to guess that you're 15% less now, because was the peak of the market. And so it's that's one big one.
I've had a lot of folks talk to me about so I won't bring up assessment.
Yeah.
But when they do, I'll go in and do almost like a CMA using assessed values. And I'll show them like so I use some
Assess
of
the
your
gold
word.
ratio
Yeah.
here.
And I've said like historically assessments are one, and a list is, let's say, assessed at 500 and you list it 629 or something like this. And you'd sell for 580 or 570. I said, what we're seeing today is the folks that are pricing with assessed value in mind and somewhat closer to it, or leaving room for negotiations, those homes are selling within reasonable time frame. So I pulled up 3 homes. One was on Pottery Road, East Vernon, and it was assessed at 505, listed at 579, and they took like 540. And then another one was assessed at 450, listed at 449, and got 440. And so it was just kind of interesting showing the folks that are bringing up assessed value, how close it is because of what happened last year. Like the value came back at June and July, things were bonkers. And so my wording is, if people are using some of that assessed value to determine what their home's worth, those homes are staying on the market longer with no offers.
Yeah, yeah, and Kamloops is kind of reversed because a lot of our assessed values are over now because of that drop. But you get the odd one that's a little bit, but it's really comes down to the conversation around pricing, because it really doesn't matter on the assess, like you said, so that kind of diminishes all that right away. And usually what I've been finding, a lot of these comparables will be in the exact same boats. Like there was one that we used that was actually for that one that I was telling you guys about that sold for 925. There's one that had sold for 965, but it was assessed at 1,118,500. So it was like way over. So I was like, these guys are in the same boat. Like
Relative a little bit.
yeah, somewhat similar, but just
And we've seen corrections on assessments.
yeah,
Like
some
that
people
one
have
would go in
actually
and
fought
say,
it.
my house is worth 1.1.
Yeah.
Oh, it's worth 870. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and it's been winning too.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing on this, and then I'll pretty much have everything wrapped up. When it comes down to pricing strategies, there's different ones. But the three main ones that I talk to my clients about is the launch pad, the seam line, and the needle in the haystack. Those are kind of the three that I'll refer to them as, unless we're doing something really wild. So what we want to do is we want to figure out, okay, what strategy makes the most sense. Now, I'll explain absorption quickly. There's going to be a tool that you guys are going to get with this. It's an absorption tool. And what it does is it's a spreadsheet, but it'll give you the data that you have to pull to get a proper absorption. And it'll give you a recommendation based on that, what the market. But really what it kind of comes down to is absorption is the amount of sales that are happening in any given month. I usually like to use 90 days of running activity. So let's say that you take 2-story homes. I don't know Vernon as well, so I'll say Kamloops. So at 2-story homes in Aberdeen, Pineview, and Sahalee in the last 90 days. And you find out there was 15 sales. And then you pull up the market and you find out that there's only 30 listings. So statistically, what that means is that in 2 months, all the single family homes in Aberdeen, Pineview would sell out. So we're like, okay, that's 2 months of absorption, assuming no new listings came on. Anything less than 3 months, you're in a bit of a seller's market. 3 to 6 months is somewhat balanced. 6 months plus is a buyer's market. And a lot of Kamloops is in 6 months right now, like 6 to 7 months. Some of them are around 4 or 5. But
There's a tool and matrix where you can get the absorption rate.
we don't have that.
Yeah, Anya knows how to do it.
Okay, yeah. So it might be worth mentioning because yeah.
But it's also like in that market newsletter we send out every month.
Yeah.
We put the absorption on page 1. So like right now, like last month, February's newsletter was, and that would have been January stats, it was 6.8. Which is a buyer's market.
Buyer's market, yeah.
And that went so quickly from like 2 point something in April, May to December's already scary. It's like 12 months of inventory.
That kind of yeah.
And then it only took like a month. I actually, somebody who's really good at stats is Mark Niffernchuk at Sutton.
Oh, okay.
He talked to me about like December absorption rates always be in December always being like,
Way out of whack.
yeah, way out of whack. Because I was freaking out. I was like, I want to talk about this on my market stat video. Because I already talked about what the absorption is. Right.
So with absorption, it sounds good. But the thing is, like, as a real estate professional, how are you using that to make decisions? That's kind of what I've always kind of looked at it. So the reason the three month less makes a difference. So perfect example of this is single family homes are around six months of inventory, but single family homes under 600,000 were less than 2 months. And there's a listing on Edgemount that came up, and Edgemount's very unique because the range was saying single family homes similar to that were anywhere between 525 and 560. This was just like 3 weeks ago, 530 to 560. But they're directly across from the train station or to train tracks. Like it's like one of the few ones. So it's like, well, how do you account for how much the market's going to adjust for that? Well, there's less than 2 months inventory. Maybe we actually go with a launch pad listing. And I explained that a launch pad means you actually undervalue this intentionally and let the buyers bring it up. They're like, well, in this market, does that actually make sense? It does, because of how you guys are positioning. So 499, 6 offers went for 525 because that absorption made sense. If that absorption had been 6 months, that'd be a horrible plan because there's no way you have enough buyers to actually get 5 or 6 offers at one time. There's not enough buyers in the market at that point. So that's where it's important. So anyway, three main pricing strategies. Launch pad, if we're less than 3 months and we have something that is, we know there's going to be a lot of buyers interested, we know there's a lot of active buyers, and you just have that gut feel, it still can make sense to do it in this market. But you just have to know your absorption and know how active that is, because there is multiple offers. In Kamloops, it's like almost 10% of the homes are still going to multiples and selling for asking or over, 1 in 10. The second one is Seamline. We talked about that, and this is where this is probably the one that I use the most. Like, where's the active listings? Where's the sales? There's usually a gap. How do we position ourselves to outperform the sales, but undercut all of our competition and get in and out quick? And if you can do that number right, you can become the best deal on the market really fast, because there's a big gap. It was a lot less before. The big gap between what you're seeing things listed for and selling for in Kamloops anyway. And then the needle in the haystack. And this is what your question was. How do you get the sellers that want that needle in the haystack buyer? If I'm giving a strategy on it, if I'm explaining it to someone, like I've got a listing on Heffley Lake, and it's the only lakefront that's been listed in the last 3 years. We finally had a second one and it sold. So now we know where we are. So we made adjustments, but it's rare. It's unique. It doesn't come up very often. Someone's going to fall in love with it. Someone's going to fall in love with it that doesn't care about money as much as like someone that's in a $600,000 range. So we're probably $200,000 high, but he's willing to wait it out and we'll probably find that buyer. So that's the needle in the haystack. So for him, we said, I was like, how much patience do you have? And how hard is it for you to sell? Because we could be on the market 6 months before we get this buyer. But if that buyer comes, the chances are they're going to hit, because we can see exactly who would buy this place. And he's like, yeah, I'll wait it out. So we've been waiting it out. But I don't know if I can't say for sure that's the right method, but my conversation with him, it's a good conversation. He knows what I'm explaining. He's told me, tell him that I'm open to offers. We've looked at, do we drop the price? Do we not? It's a constant conversation, but it's not negative, I guess, is my whole point about it.
Managing expectations.
Yeah. So it's not a negative thing. And I'll bug him, like, because he's a good guy. He's an old German guy. And I was like, are you ready to retire yet? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, let's drop our price and get you retired. He's like, oh no, I don't need to sell yet. Oh, and then like right around January, I'm like, Ben, it's so slow. I need a paycheck. Let's drop your price. He's like, oh, no, you just bring me offers, Ben. So it's fun. But
What's the price?
it's 2,095,000 now, but we were at 2.4. And
So
then
then that's benchmarks again too, okay, so now
Yeah.
maybe we gotta get that 2 million. People that are searching.
Just wanted to walk through.
yeah. Yeah, the benchmarks are huge, and that one's tough, because it's really tough to find lakefront for less than 2 million. And he'll get it. Or he'll get sick of patience. He'll do one of the two. Okay, so anyway, just to kind of recap, so that conversation is huge. Having them pick their price is huge, and picking one of those 3 listing plans and kind of committing to that. Now, when I say like all roads lead to sold, as long as we've done all the other stuff, like Pine Grass, like I was saying, was an example of, we didn't do all the stuff. They probably should have prepared it better before we went to market, but they didn't want to. We did this whole process, so they knew, like, or I brought up the carpets right away. They knew they probably should, but they chose not to. And now we're adjusting because of that. But after that's done, like I told them, the one negative side is we don't really have that to rely on anymore. So now we're starting showings this week. We get another 8 to 12 showings and no offers, then we really might be your price. And he's like, well, at least we know. Yeah, at least we know. It's true. So anyway, so we're going to start showings this week and we'll find out. And anything that I kind of miss, I don't know. I tried to give the overview, but does anyone have anything to add? Something that they're finding with sellers? Like, what are you guys seeing with the pricing conversations that you're having?
I like to bring, well, I listed a small place in West Kelowna, and it was, so the price that I gave them was $319. It's a little modular unit. And they looked at me and went, that high?
And you're like, shit.
Yeah, reset.
Last year. And we ended up at 309. And while we were at the kitchen table going over all the documents, they couldn't. The husband said he was fine either way, and she was saying, "Wait, can we go back to 319? Wait, can we go to 309?" And they had this, and so where it went, what kind of sold it was her competition on the street, like a neighbor, was, an 800 square foot unit compared to their 1,200 square foot, and they were 319. But their unit is much older. And I said, you could easily price it 319 and compete with them. And it's fair, and you're not gonna get angry knocks at your door. And he said, no, we think 309. I said, that's great. I think you'll be prepared for some quicker action. But when I compared some of their competition, they just softened right up, and it was really, I wasn't expecting. I was with Corey. I looked at him and I went, 299. What am I thinking?
The opposite conversation with the Silver Star guy, where he's like way over his
Oh,
value.
gosh.
He's on a 0.8 acre lot who thinks he's on 10 sprawling usable acres.
Yeah.
His home is probably worth somewhere between 750 and 8. And he said, you know what? I know what it's worth. And I think I'll just ask you to throw it up for $1,050,000, and I'll get, and
When it hasn't sold for $899 for 150 days.
With another agent.
another agent.
Oh,
So she still had her so it expired in January, and she still had her sign up.
Don't give away too much.
I won't give away too much. And this is true. And he has another property he asked me to look at. Anyway, so he, but he didn't understand the concept of I'm interviewing you too.
But I think strategy with him would be sit down
Yeah,
and do the matrix thing in front of him.
yeah, 100%.
Like practice it a few times. Do
Let's,
an HPI.
and then I
We did
asked
a land
him
for.
about where he was getting his value from.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a straight answer. I'm on 0.8 of an acre, and all these other people are 0.3. You couldn't get off this acre thing. But that's exactly where my head went. Was, hey, let's flip open the laptop. You show me, and you show me something similar, and I'm with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a little bit delusional.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the, again, this is what's kind of nice is the judgment call, because there's two, for me, it's almost like a personality test. There's like a litmus test on it. So like if they say to me, this is my price, take it or leave it, and I want it done in like 90 days, like, not your guy. Like, there's no way. But if that conversation can kind of meld, like my uncle, for instance, who I probably wouldn't deal with if it wasn't my uncle. It's just because like the relationship. But you know, I can have a conversation with him at least. And the reason I use him is because it's worked in his favor, where he's that guy that's like, I'm like, it's worth like 800, uncle. Like, I'm putting it at $1 million. People will love what I've done in here and the extras that I put in. And we'll stick it out, and it'll take him a year, but it'll sell. But the thing with him is that I never have to I never look at the phone. I'm like, ugh, because I've had that conversation up front. So the litmus test with him is like, how long do you want me around? Because like, that's the real question. Because there's a good chance if we go in at this, I think we're overshooting the market. And like, where does this go 3 to 6 months down the line? And with him, he's like, I don't care. Like, I'm like you said, what I'm looking for is this going to turn into a blame me type thing? Am I going to cringe every time I go on the phone with you? Or is this going to be like Ben that I can call and joke around with every single time, and it's a pleasant conversation? That's the biggest key, because eventually it's price or patience, and patience does pay out. I mean, that's the weird thing about all this, is you can't say it doesn't, because I've seen it, right? Like again, that's why I use my uncle as a thing. We listed one that I didn't think, different market, it was more balanced. It was before 2020, it was 2016, but I did not think he could get over 600,000 for a house. And he's like, people will see the quality. He's like 650. It's 550, 575. Like, people will see the quality, and I don't care. I'll wait. And he's right. Someone saw the quality a year and a half later, and he hit. And then like, I was like, I know, right? And I'm like, and then another one that I did with him more recently, and this was like right at the height of the market, but same thing. I was like, I don't think you're over $1 million, uncle. And he's like, they'll see the quality, $1.2 million. Jesus. And we talked about it a little bit more, and he's like, I'm like, what do you want me to say to him? Tell him that the quality's there, and my guy, I know what the value is, and they can make me an offer. They want me to make an offer, and depending on what day they get me, they'll get a better deal. And so I just come back, and it's funny because he waited it out, and that was a year too.
What do you
But he
get?
got it, $1 million too.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is like,
This guy should run a negotiations course.
oh, it's,
Just wait.
it's crazy, man. He doesn't, he's,
Yeah.
just look at, well, and it's, and like his perception on it is he never buys real estate unless he's in love with something unique about it. So he's always got something that's like unique about it that he saw value, and he's just got a sixth sense. He calls it out too. Like he called the $1.2 million offer. He called it the week before. I don't care. I got this feeling we're getting an offer next week. Okay. And thing shows up. I'm like, jeez, man, what are the lottery numbers? Like, what's that's all I got, guys. I appreciate you guys showing up and doing that. Do I need to stop recording or let you do anything?
Jeremy?
Yeah, you got you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, team. I'll send that presentation out and then we'll make it pretty. We have we bought it like a Canva listing presentation, so I think we'll try to marry the two.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
Bye,
very
guys.
much.
Thanks.
Bye now.